The moment my mother said she deserved my shower gifts more than me, I knew she'd lost her mind. I just didn't know how badly until 5 minutes later. I was 8 months pregnant and surrounded by pink streamers in my childhood living room, and I already had a bad feeling about the whole thing. My mother had insisted on throwing me this shower herself, and I agreed against my better judgment because she swore she wanted to do something nice for me. My mom had me when she was 14, which meant she was now 38, and had spent my entire life making sure every room she entered revolved around her. Her best friend had helped plan every detail, and the two of them had been inseparable since before I was born. Her son was practically like a little brother to me growing up since we spent every holiday together, and looking around the room, I genuinely thought I was surrounded by people who cared about my baby. I had just unwrapped a hand-knit blanket from my husband's grandmother when my mother stood up and clinked her glass with a fork. She cleared her throat and said, "I have some exciting news of my own," and before I could process what was happening, she announced that she was also pregnant. The room went silent as every guest tried to figure out if this was a joke, but my mother just stood there glowing like she expected applause. She walked over to the gift table and started picking up packages, and when my aunt asked what she was doing, my mother said, "Well, I planned this whole shower and I'm going to need baby supplies too, so I'm taking what I need." I finally found my voice and said, "You cannot be serious right now," but my mother just shrugged and said, "You're young, you have plenty of time to get more stuff, but I'm going to be a geriatric pregnancy and I need all the help I can get." She actually used the word geriatric, like it was supposed to make us feel sorry for her while she loaded a bag with my daughter's things. She picked up the car seat that my mother-in-law had spent weeks researching and said, "Oh, this is the exact one I wanted." And my husband stood up and said, "You need to put everything back right now." My mother laughed and said, "Relax, it's just baby stuff. You guys can always buy more." I asked her what was wrong with her, why she always had to make everything about herself, and she rolled her eyes like I was the one being dramatic. One of my cousins finally asked, "So who's the father?" And my mother suddenly got very quiet. She laughed nervously and said, "It's complicated." And when her best friend pressed her on why she was being so secretive after announcing everything else, my mother just kept fidgeting with the ribbon on one of the stolen gifts without making eye contact with anyone. The front door opened and a young guy walked in carrying a case of sparkling cider. It took me a second to recognize him because I had not seen him since he left for college last year. But then I realized it was my mother's best friend's 19-year-old son, the one who had been like a little brother to me my whole life. He stopped when he felt the tension in the room, looking around at all the faces staring at him, and then at my mother who had gone completely pale. He asked, "What's going on? Why does everyone look so weird?" And his mother started to say something about my mom making an announcement. His face broke into a huge grin, and he said, "Oh, she told you guys?" And he walked over to my mother and put his arm around her and announced, "I'm gonna be a dad." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. His mother, my mom's best friend who had helped plan this entire shower, made a sound like someone had punched her in the stomach. The room erupted into chaos while he looked around genuinely confused about why people were not congratulating him. His mother stood up slowly, and her voice was shaking when she asked, "Are you telling me you've been sleeping with my son?" My mother tried to stammer out some explanation about how he was 19 and technically an adult, but his mother cut her off screaming, "You were in the delivery room when he was born. You watched him take his first steps. You've known him since before he could talk." She grabbed her purse and said, "Get in the car right now," then turned back to my mother and said, "You are disgusting, and I will be calling a lawyer first thing Monday morning to see what my options are, because as far as I'm concerned, you are a predator." My mother had tears streaming down her face and said, "You can't help who you fall in love with," and her best friend got right in her face and said, "You can rot," before dragging her bewildered son out the front door. My mother stood alone in the middle of the room with everyone staring at her in complete horror. She looked at me like she expected me to defend her, like I was somehow supposed to take her side after everything she had just done. I stood up and calmly took the bag of gifts out of her hands and said, "I think it's time for you to leave." She opened her mouth to say something, but I just pointed at the door and waited until she finally walked out.